Aloha, everyone. This is another Freedom to Feel conversation, and my guest today is Dr. Josh Davis. He is an expert in neurolinguistic programming and the author of the international bestseller, Two Awesome Hours, and the co author of the USA Today bestseller, The Difference That Makes a Difference. This is the book that he sent to me. Thank you, Josh. I want to just read a little bit more about you. So, with a rich background that includes being a former Ivy League professor and founder of the Science Based Leadership Institute, Josh specializes in translating complex scientific concepts into practical strategies for everyday life. So I have to mention this too. As a dedicated dad of three, he focuses on empowering fathers to harness the science of change through NLP, helping families thrive. So I'm reading this from your bio. Thank you so much for saying yes to this conversation. I just love them. And I had to mention about you being a father because I just found out that your work it is tailored to parents, to fathers, dads specifically. So I wanted to mention that. But before we continue, dive into the book and all the questions that I have for you, the question that never left me is, and it feels like it's still one of the most important questions I ask. How would you introduce yourself? Who is Josh in this very moment?
Yes. I like to think of myself as a teacher. Like that's what really gets me going. Just the whole art and craft of teaching that connection that you have with another person. Also like what you have to do in terms of as an intellectual thing, paying attention to both the emotional connection with a whole group of people all at once and one on one, as well as the intellectual ideas. It's just one of the most fascinating things in the world to me to do. And there's also the adage that the best way to learn something is to teach it is so true. When I have to think about how is this going to come across to someone else? What scaffolding is needed? What's really the essence of the idea that I just learn it so deeply? And that it's just like what's learning something is just I can't even say why it matters to me so much. I just love it. And so that's really been once I discovered the joy of teaching, that has been one way or another what I've tried to do since then, for the last 26 years. And then,
Wow.
just NLP is perhaps the most fun and exciting stuff to teach also.
Wow. Teaching and learning, that makes me think about that quality of curiosity. It's just such playful and important, powerful, profound. All these words, they come to me when I try to describe what curiosity is.
Mm.
Creativity is just how we tap into creativity too. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, being a student and a teacher at the same time is such a beautiful thing to see. To me, I call that wisdom. Wisdom is what works, right? It's what works for each one of
Mhm.
us.
Mhm.
Really.
Well, and there's a little bit of noticing it too, being open
Mm,
to it, noticing it so you can
yeah.
change.
Right, right. And that's I have been hearing this word a lot lately from coaches, from psychotherapists, and so many people around me. Noticing. I usually say paying attention. Is that the same, one and the same,
Hmm.
or it's somehow different? Noticing.
Interesting. Interesting. You know, I am aware that words really do have so much personal meaning for people, and that for one person they might not be the same. For me, um, noticing is more of an attitude of being curious,
Mm,
and just sort of
yeah.
discovering, trying to separate my hopes, my agenda, my fears,
Mhm.
and just observing. Whereas paying attention for me personally has a little bit more of like focus. Let me really give everything to this person right now, or let me give
Oh,
everything
yeah.
to this project and say, so for me, there is a subtle but very important difference.
Mm. Oh, wow. And I could notice that difference
Mm.
right now. Almost I could sense it. Yes, I just thought about my husband, and sometimes, yeah, instead of noticing, I'm paying attention and I'm trying. to be there 100% for him. But maybe what it needs is noticing more than paying attention. I think he feels uncomfortable a lot of times too that I pay too much attention to everything
Right?
Ozzy says.
I understand that. I
Yeah.
understand that. I do it
Mhm.
sometimes, and I also am on the receiving end, and it's
Yeah.
just like, "Wait a second, I'm under a microscope." But yeah, that's one of
Yeah.
the central, like, skills to really make NLP work, and a lot of communication, but is just, let me try to observe what happens when I do this, or what this person's thoughts are. Let me just try to unpack it and just understand it, you know?
Right. Yeah. The understand. So I heard about understanding before that leads to love. So understanding and love, they're very close together. If we can understand, we might be able to love it too, or like it, or get closer to it in a warmer
Yeah.
way. So that makes sense. Um, something else. So I'm not so linear. I have all these questions. You way too many, but something caught my attention. I said that again, attention. So I didn't notice was really something that I was focused on in a sense.
Mhm.
So on your website it says really big, be the amazing dad that you are meant to be. So immediately my mind said, oh, so can amazing dads be made? Can Is this something skill that can be learned? So yeah, that's my first question to you.
Yeah. So, now you can't make anyone do anything or think anything or feel anything. They have to
Right.
have a big role in it. But I think there are many men, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, anyone listening, but that
Yeah.
this is also what I'm going to say is true for women and moms, that there's things about it that they really love. Like, they want to be both a great leader in the
Mm.
family, but they also want to be a playmate, or they want to be able to give their kids the freedom to make mistakes, but also give them the guidance so that they're not going to make terrible mistakes, right?
Yeah.
And they want to be able to,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, be someone that the kids want to talk to. Um, and at the
Yeah.
same time, they also need to be someone who is going to be able to, give them
Mhm.
the tough news, or to be able to say this is how it has to be. So there, they want to be able to do all those things. They also, because you're just with each other so much, you can get triggered and so forth, and you worry about building up a negative relationship, or that just
Wow.
your kids might want to avoid you or things like that, and so they want to be able to
Yeah.
alter that if they've done it right, or just nurture a different relationship. They
Mhm.
want to be able to support their partner. I mean, these are things that so many people want to do: harmonize the household and be.
Yeah.
So these are. It's
Yeah.
just, you get a chance to talk, and dads almost never talk about this stuff, and
Um,
men almost never talk about this stuff. And so what I've started to discover is, you get together, it's like, wow, like, I'm not
mhm.
alone, first of all, but
Mm.
then there's some really useful tools here. There's a lot of stuff that just, where would you ever learn it? And there's
Right.
some incredibly powerful stuff for doing all of those things that I just mentioned, and many more. So I think that's, in that sense, well, you could take anyone as long as they're interested.
Right.
And yeah, of course they can learn how to take the perspective of their kid, connect more in a
Mm.
different way, create a
Mm.
different environment, show up in a different state. We
Mm.
all do that all day. We have these
Yeah.
capabilities. You can't find a person who doesn't have the capability. Maybe you could find one or two. I don't know, but for the most part, right?
Yes.
For all
Yeah.
intents and purposes, right?
Yeah.
We all are capable of those things. And once you
Right.
break it down to that level of skills and tools, well, yeah, of course, it would be strange if you couldn't all be amazing dads.
Yeah, thank you for that beautiful answer. Very elaborate, very clear. Yes, as long as we are open, well, these dads are open, these people. Yeah, that's the foundation. So another question that comes to mind is, what are some of the, I would say, innate qualities in men as fathers that you see that they are kind of almost like pillars, very important to build upon with the other
Hmm.
skills that you just spoke of?
Yeah. Innate qualities.
Yeah.
And so I guess that word suggesting that they're just born with it.
Yes.
Um, and, yeah, whether they're born with it or whether it develops, I don't know. But
Yeah.
certainly there are pressures that many men, at least in the United States, feel, um, what that have to do with,
Yeah.
um, your identity is kind of wrapped up in being useful. And
Yeah.
so,
Mm.
however you interpret that, though, is, that can be interpreted a million different ways with totally opposite behaviors.
Yeah.
When and you talk about that, you use that word pillar, made me think of like, well, a pillar of support. That's kind of
Mm.
where the metaphor suggested to me, and
Yeah.
that I think
Yeah.
is you expect to be a support structure for everyone else in the family, and it kind of hurts if you can't be.
Mm.
You can doubt yourself. I think that's a very common
Yeah.
experience. Um, that said,
Yeah.
there's so many different ways of thinking about what do I bring and what's my value and what's my
Mm.
identity. And the real magic happens when you recognize that every way of behaving has makes sense in a certain context. There's a world in which it makes sense.
Mm. Yeah.
And one of the things you learn to
Mm.
do with NLP,
Mm.
and I guess we'll say more about what NLP is for those who don't
Yes.
know,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
one of the things you learn to do with NLP is to, or the core, kind of the essence of it, is to figure out, first of all, to start with that assumption, whatever the behavior is, no matter how unwanted,
Mm.
there is a world in which it makes sense.
Yeah.
And when you understand that world, that
Yeah.
psychological world, the identity, the beliefs, the purpose, the values, the behaviors, capabilities, the thoughts, the
Yes.
feelings, so forth,
All that. Yeah.
the mental images, it just,
Oh, yeah.
when you identify that, it starts to make sense
Mm.
where you can find the difference that will make the difference for that person. And
Ah.
sometimes then
Yeah.
changes actually can be very quick. I mean, I know we've all had the experience that you can work on something. It's like, oh, this, I never seem to get through to my kids, or I can't seem to start this new job, or I never seem to actually, get in shape. And then you
Yeah.
could work on that your whole life and get nowhere. I admit that. You also can kind of chip away at it slowly and like, well, actually something changed, but I'm still at this plateau, right? And then
Yeah.
also, correct me if I'm wrong, but my guess is everyone listening has also had the experience where one day you're having a conversation with a friend, maybe, and they suggest a different way of thinking, and suddenly
Mm.
something changes instantly and forever.
Yes.
So
Mm.
it can happen.
Yeah.
And what's the difference? What is it that enables us to have these
Mm.
moments when things really do change? And if
Yeah.
you actually start looking at those times when we are making progress, even when you're chipping away at it, in my experience, it is something did change once and forever, but it was just an incremental change. And then
Yeah.
it changed again. It's like, oh, yeah, now suddenly it's not an issue to be getting to the gym. But if it had to be more time, or if it had to be additional kinds of things, or things that are too painful, or things, you know, that's a different context for me. Or doing it when I feel like I'm letting down someone by not being there.
Mm.
That's a
Mm.
different context, in which
Yeah.
case I have a different set of beliefs, a different set of issues that need to be addressed.
Right.
In any of those situations, though, there is a world where that is the perfect, smartest thing you could possibly doing. And if you understand that, you can find the difference that will make the difference to make a change that will work for you, a change that will last. And that's what NLP ultimately is about, is
Mm.
finding that difference for you in that particular context,
Yeah.
sticking with it until you need to. If there's multiple changes, you're like, oh, that worked for a bit, but now I need to change something else. Great.
Yeah.
And it's a set of beliefs that enable you to continue to do that search. It's a set of tools to
Mm.
understand
Yeah.
somebody's mind, and then a set of tools to experiment with shifts, with, of course, their permission, their desire.
Right. Wow. There's so much there to unpack. I'm trying to kind of, okay. So that's one of the main questions, right? The difference that makes a difference, and also NLP, which I have interviewed some other people here before, and I have friends that they have done extensive work with NLP themselves, and they speak very differently. They one thing that I noticed is that they are very positive. They're very careful with their words. Pretty much everything I say, even if I say something, I didn't like what my husband did the other day. This friend of mine would just shift that, and she will use, maybe, well, he had good intentions. Maybe you have to see from this perspective. And she always uses different ways. It's incredible to notice that, how
Mhm.
her brain has changed or transformed with this technique. It is a technique, a modality, right, Josh?
Hmm.
It's a powerful
And so
modality.
you've noticed that she speaks to herself differently, and she'll catch herself and then
Yes.
change how she speaks to herself, and it seems to
Yeah.
actually have a positive effect on her. So what I'm hearing,
Yes, and others. Yes,
and
I
others,
hear. Yeah, it's
great.
really impactful. Yeah, it's quite potent and powerful. One of the my concerns I remember at the time when I was engaging with her initially, and then I knew she had this background, is that she was actually, I mean, came across too positive in a
Hmm.
sense of almost like not being in touch with reality or being kind of afraid. There's a concern. I was concerned that she was kind of afraid of dealing with reality or life as is. If somebody
Like
did
it wouldn't
something.
be okay to just have something actually be bad, or reality couldn't
Yes.
be, and then it was like a fear almost.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Is that something that is there some ground for that concern of mine thinking about NLP that we
Um,
yeah.
it may be that in the way that she practiced it, it may be that there was an element of truth to that. I don't know. And if
Right.
I was talking with her, I think I would explore that. I would say, "Hey, this is what I sense. That there's
Mm,
almost a little bit of fear about that. What is that about? Am I right? What is that
yeah.
about?"
Yeah.
And that's
Mhm.
from an NLP perspective. I just get curious about that because to me too, that does sound like something that could be adaptive in many contexts, but not adaptive in other contexts. And
Yes.
in NLP, we're kind of always looking for what's useful, what's adaptive. And
Mm,
sometimes feeling bad is useful.
mm.
Beyonce once said, I'm nervous when I'm not nervous before a big performance, right? You want to be a little nervous there.
Yeah.
Sometimes I want to be on
Yeah.
edge and focused. Sadness can actually make you better at persuading others and
Mm.
less likely to be taken advantage of, in research. So
I didn't know
so
that.
no, for me, that has not been a thing that it's like you must be positive. In fact, every state, one of the teachings is that every state is adaptive in some context,
Yeah.
is useful in some context.
Yes. Yes.
And, looking to how it's useful, it may be that she finds it very valuable to switch and see, like, how quickly can I move to positivity? And it may be that you are seeing that as a fear. And for her, it's a different experience. And that I
Right.
just can't know.
Right.
But I
Yeah.
wonder if I give a little bit of my explanation of what NLP is, that
Yes.
might help to both answer that and address that same concern.
Yes,
Because
please. Yeah.
I'm also not one of those like let's be
Yeah.
positive all the time people.
Right. Yeah. No.
But I love NLP and I love teaching it, and I've been doing it for 20 using I mean, I grew up around it actually. My parents
Ah,
were some of
yeah.
the first people teaching it, and then I started learning it 26 years ago, and I've been teaching it for I don't know how long,
Wow.
15 years maybe, and now
Yeah.
I've spent a couple years writing a book about it. So,
Amazing.
I think I really can speak to what it is. Um, but should I do that right now, or should
Yes,
I?
please. Yeah,
Okay,
please.
okay.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So
Yeah.
a little bit of history, I think, is the best way to just
Yeah.
to explain what it really is. And I think I've said a few words already about kind of the aim of it, and it'll make more sense, I think, in the context of where it came from. So NLP is a set of tools and ideas that come from the world of psychotherapy. And psychotherapists are people who are doing change work all day, every day, and they're looking at every kind of change you can imagine. In the 60s and 70s, all of a sudden there were a whole lot of breakthroughs in psychotherapy that where people were seeing results much more consistently, much more quickly, and often in lasting ways that just hadn't been occurring with older forms of psychotherapy. It's not that you couldn't get anywhere with older forms, but this was an exciting advance. And you had family therapy, gestalt therapy, hypnotherapy, cognitive therapy, and so on. All these new therapies that came out. Many were outcome oriented, and they were starting to do some research. Very little research yet at the time, though, and no internet or anything like that. So if you
Mhm.
wanted to learn, it's like, hey, what's going on? As my parents did, who had just started a family therapy institute. If you
Yeah.
wanted to learn what's going on, how can I work like Dr. Milton Erickson in his, who was developing
Um,
hypnotherapy, you would have to just travel to Arizona and watch him and try to copy what
I
you're seeing,
know.
right? It's a
Yeah.
very
Amazing.
slow and imprecise way.
Yeah.
My mom wanted to do that. She couldn't because she had two little kids. So she hears about this class being taught. So what had happened is many people were trying to figure out how to learn and capture and teach what these pioneers were doing. And these people are now, it's all 50 years later, it's all been researched, and there's these are names that show up in textbooks and so forth, right? It's all
Yeah.
legitimized. But at the time, you've got this linguistics professor and a partner of his, and they have these tools from linguistics to unpack the form of what somebody is saying and connect that to the meaning, and to they're able to look at not the content, but the patterns of
Right.
speech, the patterns of communication, the patterns that the therapists are using and picking up on, as well as they start looking at nonverbal communication patterns.
Mm,
And
mm.
wonder if I can get rid of the
Oh,
sun
yeah.
spotlight on my
Yeah.
face by moving that. No, didn't make a difference. Oh well. um, so
Well, son.
it's nice to have sunshine though.
Oh,
So they're
yeah.
looking at these patterns, and they just did a wonderful job of separating the signal from the noise.
Mm,
They went around teaching it. They got endorsements from the people they studied, and they went around teaching it. And many therapists said, "Wow, this is really powerful, and it seems like you have really landed on the signal," and started using it over the years. When coaching became a thing, people started using it. Some
right.
people recognized the power for marketing and sales and other areas and started using it. You've probably heard of Tony Robbins. He, said, now he's someone who seems to have that sort of positive vibe where it's like, let's go, let's get energized. That
Mhm,
does, I think that's him, not necessarily NLP.
mhm.
But he talked about how these are some of the most powerful things that he's come across, NLP, and he uses it all the time because it's so useful.
Right.
And so I've taken it, and I'm, being a dad of three, and I love being a dad. I'm applying it for dads. But in the
Uh,
book, we're trying to make it accessible for everyone, simple and easy to understand. And with my scientific background, I've gone and found the research for each of these things and connected the dots. It's all cited. We want people to have it, to be able to share it and look at it. So that's all in the book. And then it's just kind of, as you go, there's one tool in each chapter, and you can reflect on it. And there's reflection questions, and then you're using the
right.
tool, and you can use it again.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is what where NLP comes from and why it's so powerful. And then the essence of it is, let me understand this world that somebody else is living in, so that I can then identify where change can be helpful, or so that they can. Typically, you don't even need to do anything else. But then there's still many ways to help, kind of, once you have built that connection, to help move someone in a new direction.
Yes, it sounds to me like an amazing, using that word that you use on your website, an amazing field, yeah, to be,
Yes.
yeah, change and transformation. And with that in mind, I think I asked this question before to somebody, or maybe many people. What is the difference between change and transformation? How do we know when we have made enough changes to be transformed?
Yeah.
What is, yeah, I'd love to get
Right.
that from you, that perspective.
Yeah. My perspective on that, which is not something that I've thought about before, but a difference between change and transformation. I certainly know when I use that word, and it's a word that gets tossed around a lot. I'm delighted when I teach a workshop or do some coaching, and somebody says that was transformational, right? I mean, isn't that what
Yeah,
we all love hearing that? What
yeah,
I take that to mean is that there was something that feels like it was a shift that really opened a door in such a way that something new is now very likely to be the path of least resistance. A new way of thinking of myself, a new way of behaving, that it's like I had been limiting myself up until this point, and it really seems this is going to be different. I believe that it's going to be different. Now, there's a subset of people who it doesn't matter how powerful the shift was, their decision strategy involves collecting evidence and testing it out. And so
yeah,
that is not, they would not call that transformational. They would call that exciting or wonderful or an insight. And they're
yeah,
hopeful.
yeah.
And they're saying, I want to see how this plays out and whether I remember this over the next weeks and months. And I can, in either case, I will help them do that, because I
Yeah,
know that those are important steps.
right.
Right. But so for me,
Mm,
that's what it is, that it has to do with the experience associated with the change.
mm,
But I think we're talking, in either case, we're talking about creating a new path of least resistance. A new
Right.
door is opened.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that way. It's very clear to me. Right. So we are not pushing away, resisting something that had been there before and we perceived as a blockage, as something that was kind of
Yeah.
probably stopping us from going forward. So that makes a lot of sense. I have this question for you about how did you get here? Like, what do you call becoming a writer? Was there destiny, guidance from your parents, God? I would love to hear the backstory of
Hmm.
you.
I can tell the story the way I tell it, and whether it may be that somebody else listening will say, "Hey, you're not even seeing the pattern, Josh. It is this or it is that." But here's how I look at it: is that I so I just like discovered this love of teaching. And I remember even going all the way back to high school. It's like if a friend had a question on something, I'd get excited, right? Like, oh, let me try to figure out how to explain it. I can't say why that called to me, but I love doing that. And then I remember clearly this one friend of mine who would just ask me something. I was like, why don't you ask the teacher? He said, I like how you explain it better. And
Ah,
like, I just, some things you remember because it taps into something meaningful for you. And I remember sitting there next to him having that conversation in high school. And it's just something about that tapped into something very meaningful for me. Anyway, as I've gone through, I was teaching in this last chance Brooklyn high school, in public high school, meaning like this is their last chance. After this, they're not allowed to be in high school anymore.
yeah, yeah.
And for all kinds of reasons. And I fell in love with it. I mean, it was like I had a tough time at the beginning, as everyone does, but that whole process of teaching. And then when I got to NLP, I was just like, wow, I want to teach this stuff. I want to guide people through these kinds of experiences and help them understand the potential of their mind and their potential to change themselves.
Mm.
And I use this stuff all the time. I mean, even to the point, I didn't invent the stuff, but I like learning how to teach it so people can
Right.
use it. I'll
Yeah.
read something in the book or take myself through one of these exercises in the book, and I'll just be like, each time, I'm just like, oh my God, it really works. Like after 26 years of doing it, you
Mm.
know, it's still helpful in that way. So I loved this idea of teaching it. And then when I got the opportunity to write, I actually didn't plan to, actually, I'll tell you, I'll step back. This, I think, is a story that can be useful for some people too,
Yeah.
just as a metaphor. I hated writing. I found it such a struggle. I
Yeah.
really if you talk to my mom from like when I was 10 years old and how much pain some of the homework assignments caused me, and she would sit there with me and help me get through it.
Yeah.
And God bless her. I mean, there's,
Oh,
there's probably
mother.
a lot of parents who don't have that patience. Maybe I don't know. But so this was not something that I enjoyed doing. And then when I was in my mid 30s, I don't remember exactly when, one day, actually, this is one of those one day stories. And I'm
Yes.
not
No
saying
wonder.
everything in my life is one of those. I'm just
Uh-huh.
saying it is possible and it happens from time to time.
Yeah.
Um, but I landed on the difference that made the difference. So I was
Mm.
in an NLP class and we were doing a modeling exercise. Modeling is the kind of amazing stuff. If somebody else has a skill that you want, you can learn how to interview them to identify all the different aspects of what's going on in their mind. And there's guidance for doing that in the book too, and
Right.
in the
Wow.
back in the appendix.
Yeah.
But you can learn to do that and then take on what works for you from what you've learned,
Right.
right? And create new capabilities. So in this particular case, someone was modeling my ability to do something that seemed trivial and silly to me. I had always taken pride in how I made a small New York City apartment be really
Huh.
like look bigger than it was and be very useful.
Yeah.
So I liked that problem, right? And I and
Okay.
I, and people would comment on, oh wow, like you've really managed to make this place kind of nice, and you've got like a lot more
Mm.
stuff in here than I would
Huh.
expect without it feeling crowded. So,
Yeah.
so I was succeeding in that, and so this person is modeling my capability, unpacking how I go about doing it.
Mm.
And one of the key things had to do with the fact that I had no problem imagining all kinds of things that were impossible and just letting them sit there It's just like, I'd like to have a couch here and a table here, and also have a big open entryway, as well as to have some really cool art also in the same space. Impossible. Can't
Yeah.
have it all in the same space. But I would be okay with that. I would just sit with that. I'd be like, these are all the things I want somehow. And I
Right.
would just sit with that. And that was fine for that particular context. I, I hadn't applied that to any other context. And over time, wanting all of that, things would then start to come together where it's like, well, wait a second, I can relax this constraint, but I could have that. And if I did it this way and I had smaller couch over here and a
Uh-huh.
table that's actually nailed to the wall in two sides, then I don't need to have the
Yes.
space. And so I would, but unless I let myself be there with that stuff.
Yeah.
So that week I'm in like aiming to try to write an article. And I decide, I'm like, something clicks. I'm like, what if I apply the same process to writing? And I
Mm.
just let myself sit with that, with the writing.
Mm.
I want to start the article this way, and I want to start it that way, and I want to start it that way, and I want to
Right.
have this kind of scientific evidence. I want this and this. Impossible to have that all in a 1,000-word article. Impossible to start the article 3 different ways, so forth. And I just let myself sit with that. Before
Uh,
I knew it, after gathering all that, the
mm.
next day I'm writing this beautiful article, better than anything I've written. I loved the process. I
Right.
loved writing from then on. I love it. I love it. I look forward to it. I've written 2 books now.
Yeah.
They're bestsellers.
Yeah.
They got great reviews. I'm proud of them, and I've written a bunch of articles. Almost all of my writing is since that week.
Um,
So that was how I came to, and then well, anyway, the specific story of why writing this book, I can get into that too, but
yes.
I've always wanted to bring NLP to the masses. I mean, so many people need to know about it. There's just so much to work with, and I think Greg and I have made it accessible.
Mm, yes. I love the stories. Yeah, thank you for sharing that the way you do. And what comes to mind, like noticing, using the you tell the story and your body language and everything, it just comes to me. The question is, have you always been this way? I'm wondering if were you a happy child? Because
Mm,
seems to me from my perspective they you probably didn't have a lot of traumatic experiences. A lot of the audience, they are very much, including myself, we come from trauma. So that's one of the questions too. Could NLP help people with a trauma background, and
mhm.
have you had those experiences?
Yeah. I did. I'm happy to say I had
Yeah.
I think what most people would call a happy childhood. Um, I certainly struggled with feeling left out and sad and lonely and, those kinds of things. And um, Anxious. I would get anxious very easily. But no, I didn't suffer trauma. And, having my parents being, knowing this stuff, and I
Yes,
think
I
they
have.
were very present, available parents, right? They weren't trying to use it all the time, but when they were able to understand and communicate effectively and be thoughtful about, what would help, where to set boundaries and so forth. And so that was great. Um,
Yeah.
there are a lot of people who have explored NLP for trauma, and a couple of things. One is there's a protocol actually that's being researched where there's a specific NLP technique that initially was used to help people get over phobias. It's a wonderful technique, and very powerful with fears that you have. And then some other people have taken it and made an adaptation of it. It's called the RCM protocol, Reconsolidation and RTM, of Traumatic Memories
Yeah.
protocol.
Yeah.
And so they've been doing research studies to actually look at outcomes for trauma, and the results. I mean, I guess these are the proof of concept studies, and then they'll do larger scale studies and so forth. But the results in published journals are showing things like, I remember one of them being like 48% of people going through the protocol no longer had PTSD symptoms 6 months later. These are veterans.
Right.
Whereas the next
Oh,
most, the top of, the, what do you call it? The treatment that was considered best in class was like a third of that. In terms of 6 months later, it's like cognitive therapy. I think it was like 16% or 18% 6 months later that no longer met criteria for PTSD. So
right.
yeah, there are people who take it and apply it into those kinds of issues. And I think many of us, we form beliefs, we form skills through our early experiences, sometimes
Yeah.
whether they're traumatic or otherwise.
Yeah.
And many years later, while we may have learned new skills, I may have learned how to, let's say, relate to certain people, like friends, in a certain way. But when it
Yeah.
comes to personal romantic relationships, maybe I just haven't applied those same adult skills.
Mm,
And it's
mm,
still this younger me who's learned that you need to be afraid, or who's
yeah.
learned that you need to always doubt, right?
Right.
That is trying to call the shots, but isn't. And you can learn, there are NLP tools to help go back and kind of bring some of these adult resources to that younger self, to kind of free up that younger self, uh, so
Right.
that the adult you can kind of step in. And there's inner healing that happens.
Mm,
And so, yeah, so short answer is yes. A number of people have gone in that direction with it. And trauma or not trauma, I think there's a lot of tools that are very powerful that many therapists will use. I'm not a therapist myself, so I'm not working in that space,
yeah.
but yeah, I know that certainly is done.
Yes. It very much sounds like it to me. And I really wanted to try at some point. I remember I interviewed lots of people, coaches here on the same topic, NLP. I guess one of the things for me, it's funny words, programming kind of it stopped me from
Very
moving
off-putting,
forward.
isn't it?
Yeah, I'm like, I don't want to be programmed. I don't want to. I've been programmed enough. So I thought, why they could have changed to perhaps neurolinguistic possibilities, or perhaps even processing, but not.
you know the
This is it.
name the look, and the name, you have to explain it every time you use it. I mean, I would say maybe at the time it was like a really groundbreaking name. Maybe they were motivated by computer programming metaphors. Maybe the
Sure.
idea was about
Yes.
reprogramming myself, not somebody else programming me, right?
Yes.
Maybe the idea had to do with just, it
Yeah.
was a throwaway word. I don't know. Maybe, and then, but they wanted to focus on neurolinguistic. But anyway, yes, you're not the only one to have that response.
Oh, good.
And I think the best thing to do is just to say that's the name, for better or worse.
Yeah.
And it takes a little explanation, but let's think about, what is it? What's the positive
Mm,
intention behind this name? It's the
yeah.
idea that
Yeah.
language does influence thought. Language also reflects thought. We can tap into that to help unpack someone's limiting beliefs, or what their mental model is in a situation.
Yeah.
And we can help them to create a new set of behaviors and thoughts and reactions. Now, if you want to call that a program, I mean, it does
Mhm.
have some analogies to that. There's the metaphor of programs, like you get triggered and a program runs once it's started, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so if you had a new program, right, you can learn to get triggered and then do something more adaptive. And you really can learn to have a new reaction to a trigger. There's a number of tools for that.
Yes, yeah, thank you for giving the very clear explanation because it is
Mhm.
still, yeah, it needs an explanation. And for
It
people
does.
like me, yeah, with traumas and all that, we have been programmed by others in society and all those things. But I have another question to ask you. It's an open question aside from the book. I know I wanted to mention chapter 9 because that really caught my attention. If I knew then what I knew then. So you kind of changed that quote, that very.
Mhm.
But before that, do you see a difference between, or not even a difference, but the connection? Really, what is the precise connection between the brain, the physical brain, and the mind?
What is the precise connection? No one knows. So,
I'm
um,
wondering. I thought you
there
knew.
it
Sorry.
I'm fascinated by it, and many people are, and, we're chipping away at it as a species, as a society, as scientists, we're chipping away at it. Um, some things that we have learned that I think are very important to know are that it is a system that you can enter at any point. So if you, for example, change your physiology, you do change how you think and how you feel. and the behaviors that are likely, you can change your thoughts, and that will change the other things. You
Mm,
can enter the system at any point. There's no primacy. It's not like it all
right.
starts in the head,
Yeah.
or it all starts in
Mm,
the body. It's a
mm,
system that's continually influencing the different parts, and you can experiment anywhere. So that's one thing that we know that I think is important.
right. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I was just wondering here, now while you're speaking, I have thought about this way before coming here. Uh, so belief systems are quite interesting. They seem to be held not just in memories, but also in the body. So both too. It's I see how some people even talk in the way they say phrases like, "I don't do anything right." I hear that from some of my family members when they, when I say something very naive, very small about, "Oh, why did you put this bottle here? The water here was supposed to be there." Very naively, in very in a kind way, but they kind of react, or they seem to be triggered by that belief system. In that part, as you know, there's a healing modality called internal family systems. So they
Hmm.
have parts. So I can see that clearly. That wait a minute, this is a belief system that's held not just in the somewhere in your memory, but also in the body, because they actually I see them responding with the body too, as if that part kind of embodied your personality, your person in that moment. It's fascinating to just watch that.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
painful
an
though.
interesting idea.
Yeah,
Oh yeah,
it's also
it's an
painful.
interesting idea that the that we store beliefs or hold beliefs in our body. And
Yeah,
I want to suggest that yes, the body is um, definitely an important part of that process you just described of someone reacting, getting triggered.
yeah.
I also want to suggest that it may be a bit limiting to the idea that we store them in our body or hold them in our body.
Mm,
For some people, that may be a very empowering belief. But I also want to suggest that it's like it the idea that any kind of thought resides anywhere in a part of the brain or in a part of the body
mm,
takes us to a place where it becomes this fixed thing. And that's when I could imagine it being a little bit limiting. And instead, and I know this is a common belief, and people are like, oh yeah, and they've been like, yeah, so now I'm going to work on my body. Now I'm empowered to work on my body. And so I
right,
don't want to take that away from anyone. Yes,
right,
you are empowered to work on your body, and it will make a difference, right?
right.
And you may free some things up. Um,
Mm,
I think, like you mentioned, this, I always make mistakes or I always mess everything up might be a belief,
I
right?
hear that. Yeah.
And so the way I would explore that is to say, okay, if a person is showing up that way, first of all, it's a mental filter.
Mm,
So when the information that suggests they don't make mistakes, they will delete or ignore.
mm,
Information that suggests they do make mistakes, they'll catalog it, make a
uh,
note of it.
yeah.
They're likely to have a body stance where they're expecting to get beat up or treated poorly because they made another mistake or
Mm,
be
mm,
outcast. They're likely to be looking for evidence that they're going to be rejected. So, research on rejection sensitivity. So, people
yeah.
that believe they're going to be rejected then end up behaving in ways that get them rejected more, right? Because you're
Yes.
right. So you're operating within this world that's how people see. It's likely to affect their identity. So it's gonna affect your
Yeah.
muscle tension and your breathing and your posture because it has to do with these sort of defensive stances.
Yeah.
Now, if that's, where is it stored? It's not really, it's like, how do you enact it is probably more of a useful way of thinking of it.
Mm,
And
yes.
then we can say, okay, so yeah, it's not a thing that's just stored, it's an action, it's a
Right.
process. And
Right.
so let's turn it back into a process. Let's stop talking about it as a thing. And so what is that process? Teach me how to go about feeling like I am always a problem. Oh, well, I would
Mhm.
have to stand defensively. I would have to only pay attention to the
Yeah.
things where I don't work. And then even that phrase always, this is one of those
Yeah.
patterns in NLP we learn to listen for. Somebody says always,
Mm.
very seldom the case that something is always one way or the
Right.
other.
Right.
And so you can just explore that and say, really, always? You are always a problem? There has never been a
Yes.
single time in your life when you weren't a problem?
Mm.
Because when they speak that way, it typically reflects a limiting belief, right?
Yeah.
That they're only paying attention to that. So there's all these components, right? And so yeah, the body stuff, play with that, adjust that posture, adjust
Mm,
that stance, but also adjust those filters and adjust, what happens if I take a different, what happens if I don't make it always, but sometimes, or in these contexts, or in these ways, right? Or I have, but I'm also really a great problem solver in other ways.
mm.
Almost sure that that's true for anyone listening, right? So
Yes, right,
so that's yeah, let's explore all those things, and then you'll find the difference that'll make the difference.
right, right. Wow. I wanted to have your image here again. So, I love the way you express. I mean, your not just your faith, your trust, your knowledge that comes through very clearly with NLP. What you teach, it's beautiful to see that because I see a lot of confidence too, not just positivity, but confidence in the impact of this modality. Um, one of the things that I was about to say, I want to go back to chapter 9.
Right. If I knew then what I knew then, it's
Yeah, right. Because that's to do with shame and blaming oneself and all those things. But I had something else to talk about, and I forgot what it was. Gosh, I wish. I hope I still remember. I want to go back to something that I wanted to mention to you. But yeah, I want to thank you again for that. It's beautiful to see you explaining. Oh yes, I just remember because I'm very devoted in a sense to anything that could make a change, not just, and I think it starts with humans, with our own minds, the way we behave, the way what we believe in. And I personally tried not to have belief systems, to be as open as possible, but I have been programmed, so I don't think we can navigate this reality without belief systems. So I really try to be very flexible with the ones I have. But the question that I often ask everyone about anything that they are coming to present here as something that could make a change, a positive change, or something that could transform, whatever it is. My main thing is suffering. So, would you say that NLP could end suffering?
hmm. This may be a very useful answer, or it may be a frustrating answer. I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's explore it. Um, So in NLP, we have this one of the foundational beliefs. One of them you mentioned is caught up this idea. If I knew them when I knew them, which is capturing the idea that
Yes.
everyone behaves in the best way they know how, given their mental model at the time. Right.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, so if that's the case, suffering is adaptive in certain contexts. So a person who is suffering, that's an
Yeah.
action. It's something they are doing,
Yeah.
right? And it doesn't mean it's their fault. It means it's the best way they know how to handle the situation.
Right.
Suffering does something for them. Maybe it helps them to attract other sufferers. Maybe it helps to focus their attention on what needs to be fixed. Maybe it
Mm.
helps them to, um, recognize that there are boundaries that are being trampled on. Those are very positive intentions, by the way. Recognizing your boundaries, connecting with other people going
Mm.
through the same thing.
Mm.
Those are positive things. The
Yes.
suffering feels like self sabotage, and maybe it is. Maybe it's actually making it harder for you to connect. Maybe it's to get what your outcome, but that's the best way you know how in
Right.
that moment, given that context, given the milieu of your feelings in that moment and your beliefs and your hopes, even if they've
Yeah.
been different at a different time in your life. So the
Right.
suffering is serving a function. The question is, how do I serve that function more adaptively
Yeah.
than needing to suffer?
Right.
And so suffering will continue to happen forever.
Mm.
And when it does, let's equip people to be able to either use that suffering in an adaptive way or move out of that suffering, right? Help people through that suffering to tap into what it is trying to accomplish in a
Yeah.
more adaptive way,
Yeah.
and where we can. And some people will be stuck suffering for some time, as we know. If somebody's, one of these horrific situations of being kidnapped or something, and they
Oh yeah.
literally are held,
Yeah.
um, and yet,
Yeah.
I guess, I suppose there's stories like, Viktor Frankl's, right,
Yeah.
where he
Yeah. I mean,
was able to find meaning in it, right? And I guess it's not that he didn't suffer, but it was a different kind of experience
yes.
than other kinds of suffering. So yeah, so it's like yes, of course, we should learn to treat one another better. And I think if everybody knew NLP and cared about it and had
Mm,
the right motivations
yeah.
behind it and was using it ethically and responsibly, yeah, we'd have a lot more harmony.
Uh,
Um, and I would never expect suffering to disappear because
mm,
it's a thing humans can do. So it must be
yeah.
adaptive in some contexts. But yes, I think we can have a world that so many of us want to live in, much more. The more people that know and use NLP, yeah.
Yeah, will be a more harmony. I'm fascinated by yeah, what you said about suffering might not end. So you see quite a difference between pain and suffering? Because I usually make a difference between those two. I don't know if it's just a language thing or
Yeah.
concept thing, but I
Well, do
do
you
think.
have something in mind when you think of it? Why that's an
Yeah.
important distinction for you?
Yeah, when I asked that question, the first question, there was a reason why I asked the question about the qualities that would make an amazing dad, like the innate qualities in them, in a person in general, but anybody, especially a parent. And to me, always comes to mind empathy, like compassion, empathy, this this beautiful feeling of always connecting, like trying to connect instead of disconnect, always coming from a place of love instead of violence or aggression. So to me, that's like the foundation of everything. Like
Hmm.
that's where I sit. This is
Yeah.
where the world will be such a much better place. So when it comes to suffering, it's pain to me. It's feeling this disconnection between humans. When I see the disconnection within themselves, if they cannot connect with me, like some of people in my family, so that's very painful. But I wouldn't say it's suffering because
Hmm.
suffering would be something that I would be carrying, perhaps, like every day, every moment. There's no lightness or joy. So then to me, there's a difference because also my understanding, my view of life, it's quite different. I'm a student of non-duality. So basically, I'm always meditating on, this ground of existence that doesn't change. So this is where I sit too, in all the, so I can kind of dance and play with the things that change, all these things that seem to be very chaotic. So yes, so I do have a very different view between those two things, but it seems like you don't. So I would like
Hmm.
to love to
Well,
hear.
I do want to really, I really appreciate that you bringing up that, and I want to respect anyone listening because I know many people have different meanings for these things, and they may be thinking of a particular suffering that they're going through. That even the suggestion that it could be adaptive in any way for them, or that it could have any positive intention behind it, can sound like an insult. Can
Yeah,
sound like,
yeah,
what are you saying? And they might hear it as saying, "Oh, is it my fault?" And I want to clarify,
right,
no, not your fault
right.
in any way. Is it an insult? No. Is there a path out of the suffering by exploring, what does the suffering do for me? The feelings of suffering. And so you said the pain. So now there's
Yeah,
the external situation that I'm put in, and maybe I can't change that. And if that's what you're describing as the suffering, then that's different.
mm,
But if you're talking about the experience of almost what you might, this feeling down and hopeless, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
that is something that's the best way you know how to try to get yourself out of this situation. It means that you are motivated and you care and you want something better, right?
Yeah,
Otherwise, you just,
yeah,
it's like there's a struggle alive. That's what it means, right? For many people, it might
mm,
be different for different people. And so,
yeah,
what I would say is, okay, that's there. If that's, let's tap into that positive energy behind it
yeah,
and have some hope, right? And I know that for some people, there may be other things, there may be a biochemical thing going on and so forth.
right,
It's all out of my pay grade, right? you
yeah,
know, and so, and I'm not gonna look down on any treatments that people find that work, right? I'm not. That's not for me to say. But what I can say is, you know, there is a lot that has to do with where we limit ourselves unnecessarily or where we try to fight something internally. You mentioned these internal family systems. In
yeah,
NLP, we would just, I think, reference that as Gestalt chair work. But yeah, like similar stuff. Like,
Right.
what is this part of me that's like holding down and saying, no, you can't get free and you must suffer. And that to me is different from pain. So I hope that if there's anyone who did have any of those reactions, that what I've said helps you to know my that I'm seeing this as potential to find new meaning, and you know, because others have, not because in any way that you're at fault. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's and I think an NLP approach to it is just like, let's explore this. Let's try to discover. Let's notice the thoughts and feelings and beliefs, right, that are enabling the suffering to continue, and focus on what you have control over to start
Mm,
making progress on.
yeah, that's it. Yeah. It's truly, truly beautiful to notice your clarity and intention. I love the intention behind what you do. It comes across very
Thank you.
powerfully, very clearly. The intention, and then how happy you are doing this work. That says a lot too. I see the joy behind. I love to teach. I love to learn. I mean, it's
Yes.
just beautiful to witness. Thank you so much, Josh, for being you. Thank you. What a beautiful being, beyond human to
You're
me.
very welcome. How could I do anything else, I suppose, but
Ah,
be me? Right?
yeah, it's a choice, less
Yeah.
choice. Beautiful. So your website is joshdavisphd.com/dads. Will be on the podcast notes at the end of the video too. So there's so many questions that I didn't ask you, but perhaps we can come back one day to explore a bit more of NLP. I want to thank you again for your beautiful work. And at the end of this conversation, would you like to read a passage in your book, or any
Oh,
final thoughts,
yeah, I
anything?
just had a thought. So you mentioned, that chapter, if I knew then what I knew then, it kind of called to you,
Yes,
jumped out.
that's
And
my.
so I would invite anyone listening, and you can do this right now also, but you can go ahead and think of some time, um, when in the past you said something and maybe it was embarrassing, or you did something like, why did I do that? I can't believe that. Right. And recognize, see, now you're at a different place. Of course, you know better. Of course, you wouldn't do that now, because it's a different
Yeah,
context and you've learned more and you've developed. And just what happens when as you look at that from a person perspective, from a distance now, back then, seeing yourself back then with some compassion. And if you just say to yourself, if I knew then what I knew then, I would do it all exactly the same,
right,
necessarily, because
mm,
you were operating the best you knew how, given your mental model of the world at the time.
right,
And that is always true.
mm,
And
yeah.
you can give yourself a hug and move
Ah,
on and be present.
yeah, that's what a beautiful message. It's one that I have been practicing for a while through my spirituality, spirit meditation, and spiritual practices. And it's very interesting that you mentioned in the book so precisely too with those words. Yeah, I didn't know better. That's why I didn't do better. So, and that's the story. That's, to me, it closed the book, kind of closes, and okay, let me write a new story now.
Yeah.
So, and I wish for everyone to have this openness. We started with the kind of promise too that this is the foundation, right, Josh, for change. It's being open and receptive, that willingness to do something different, something that can make a difference. I love the word, so that the difference that makes a difference. Yeah, it's all about that, isn't it? There's so much beauty in the world, that everything's so, you look at nature, it's so diverse, so different, so much to appreciate. But then we humans tend to kind of get stuck in one, in some aspects, fixed aspects of being, of our humanness, and kind of stay there. And that's quite sad. It saddens me because I see the suffering behind it, the pain. But yeah, maybe that's why I do this work. I would love for people to know you, know your book, and kind of change everything. So thank you. Thank you so much for your collaboration, your contribution to well-being. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on and helping me communicate with your whole audience, and to connect with you. It's really been wonderful.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. So I do have a final question for you that I usually ask everyone, but not everyone actually. I have been asking for doing this for years, and I stopped asking that question. So I'll ask you this
Okay.
final question. What are
Okay.
three experiences you wish everyone to have before they die?
Before they
Any-
die. Right.
yeah.
Right. Um, right. Because after they die, it'd be different experiences. Right.
Yes.
But before they die, yes, for everyone to have. I hope that you get to have at least one moment of insight into who you are and why you behave as you do. It's just such a wonderful experience, this aha moment of like, oh my God, I know myself and I know that I have a choice about how I want to operate or think or feel. So that
Yeah.
would be one, certainly. Um, I think the love of a child,
Mm.
whether it's your own child or some other child, but just having a moment to like be
Yeah.
present with someone who's in that,
Mm.
like that stage of just, learning
Yeah.
and growth and being willing to explore and experiment and just
Wow.
emotion, no filter in terms of feeling their
Mm.
emotions, just being able to be present with that and connect. That connection is something I would wish for everyone.
Yeah.
And yeah, one other experience,
Yes. For
um,
everyone. I know. Is that like
that
always? Hopefully not.
that
Sound
everyone could
like
have. Yeah, yeah,
everyone, yeah.
yeah. I mean, honestly, I love learning so much that
Mm.
it's just like that's for me, that's such a good time if
Yeah.
I'm like discovering something about how the world works. I guess that's similar to discovering something about how you do. That's kind of like two of them are sort of the same, aren't they? Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So oh, you know what?
I love that.
Another one I would love for everyone to glimpse at least
Yeah.
is to know that you're enough. At least
Ah,
have a moment where you realize that, oh, I
beautiful.
am enough.
Beautiful. Ah, that's a beautiful one. Yes. That's a big one too when it comes to reprogramming, rewriting. That's a tough one too.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for your wisdom too, Josh. I can clearly see that. Yeah, how open you are to let that timeless wisdom to flow through you. I see
Mm.
that so clearly. Thank you. So we'll talk again. Hopefully, we'll meet again for another conversation. But
I
have
hope
a
so.
beautiful, yeah, take good care of your beautiful self and your family. And we'll talk soon. We'll be in touch again. Bye for now. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.